This is the new and improved £50 note, which features the likeness of Queen Elizabeth and Alan Turing, the genius mathematician who broke Enigma helping the Allies win World War II. But despite being a war hero, he's come closer to serving jail time than Lizzie's least favourite son. Unlike the dodgy Duke, the weird secret that the new £50 note is hiding is perfectly legal. You see, this polymer banknote contains a small amount of tallow, which is a waxy white substance made from rendering cow fat. If you're thinking, ew, I don't want any of that stuff in the rolled up notes I used to take my powdered vitamins in the morning, then you're not alone. Various different religious and ethical groups had the same reaction, and they petitioned the UK government to stop using tallow in its banknotes. And guess what happened? Nothing. And it's not just us Brits that like a bit of cow in our cash. If you're from any of these countries, then the cash in your pocket is also laced with cocaine tallow, so you're not off the hook either. So at this point you might be thinking, why do they use tallow? How much of it is actually in my cash, and is there a less bovine alternative out there? Well, that's what we'll take a look at in the rest of this video. To understand why tallow is used, we first need to understand an inherent problem that plagues polymer banknotes: static electricity. If you've ever rubbed a balloon on your hair or tried to bend water with a plastic comb and pretend you're Katara, you'll have seen the effects of static electricity. The new notes are made from a plastic polymer. As you might remember from school, plastic is an excellent electrical insulator. This means the polymer notes have a tendency to build up that static electric charge, which could cause them to stick to one another, causing cash machines to malfunction. But probably not in the fun way. And in day-to-day life, having to constantly peel your cash apart every single time you need to pay for something would quickly drive you crazy. This is where tallow fits in. On its own, tallow is actually a great electrical insulator, as it's made up of 3 fatty acids, which would be a problem. But when it's combined with ammonia under the right conditions, it forms a chemical compound with unique anti-static properties, as the molecule's hydrophilic end can bind water from the air, creating a conductive layer on the surface of a note that dissipates away any charge. In addition, tallow also keeps the notes in your wallet lubricated, so that they actually feel like real money, instead of feeling like they've just come out of a Monopoly set. Alright, that's probably enough science for a casual YouTube video, so how about we move on to some maths instead? It seems that tallow plays a pretty essential role, but how much of it are we actually using? Well, most sources suggest that tallow accounts for less than 0.05% of the weight of a polymer banknote, which isn't exactly a whole lot. But when a staggering 1.8 billion new polymer notes worth an eye-watering £33.7 billion were printed last year in the UK alone, the global usage of tallow in banknotes isn't exactly insignificant either. Looking at the numbers for the UK between 2020 and 2021, you can see that almost 900 kilograms of tallow was needed to manufacture the new notes. The average cow, weighing in around 700 kilograms with around 25% body fat, can feasibly produce 14 kilograms of usable tallow. That equates to around 64 cows being used last year to make the new notes for just the UK. The global number will be a lot higher. Whether this animal cost feels acceptable is up to you to decide, but when you also factor in the considerable carbon impact of raising cattle, accompanied with the strong ethical and religious objections from a sizable and growing percentage of the UK population, it begs the question, why not switch to an alternative? When it comes to potential alternatives, there's some good news and some bad news. The good news is there are some plant-based alternatives to tallow out there, but unfortunately there's only one that's currently commercially viable, and therein lies the bad news, because that alternative is derived from palm oil, which doesn't exactly have the best track record. Unfortunately, like livestock production, palm oil production is about as eco-friendly as a forest fire, literally. Around 90% of the world's palm oil trees are grown in just 2 countries, Malaysia and Indonesia, whose islands are home to some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. And as global demand for palm oil has increased, so has deforestation of these countries' rainforests. In fact, it's estimated that between 1990 and 2005, around 60% of the palm oil expansion in Indonesia replaced pristine rainforests. That's around 27,000 square kilometers, which is roughly equivalent to the country of Albania. decimated to make room for palm oil plantations. What's even worse is that historically, the cheapest and fastest way to clear those rainforests has been to just burn them down, releasing carbon that has been locked up for hundreds of thousands of years into our air, where it's able to hasten both global warming and climate change. And the problems don't stop there. Palm oil production has many wider social and economic impacts that I don't have time to go into in this video, but here are some resources you can have a look at if you're interested. So with the only commercially viable alternative to tallow being derived from palm oil, it appears the real question is, which of these is the less terrible option? A question that the Bank of England looked into in 2017. According to the results of their survey, it seems that 88% of respondents were against the use of tallow, whereas only 48% opposed the use of the palm oil alternative. So it seemed that the latter was clearly the winner here. So why haven't we seen the change? Well, shockingly, the answer is cost. It always comes down to the money. It's kind of ironic that the extra £16.5 million it would cost to switch would actually be a problem for an institution that has a literal money printing machine. What's that? Inflation? Never heard of it, mate. Anyway, in the end, they decided that the change just wasn't worth it for UK taxpayers who would ultimately bear that expense. Well, there is no easy answer. Both options have their drawbacks, and it just comes down to what you think is the better option, or more accurately, the lesser evil. Without a doubt, when compared to the palm oil industry, the beef industry has a much bigger carbon footprint and is a much more significant contributor to climate change. As it turns out, using plants to produce the fats used to make banknotes is just inherently more efficient than using animals. That's just a fact. But there is some nuance here, because cows are reared and killed for their beef. Their fat, and therefore their tallow, is just a byproduct that might otherwise go to waste, which means that using it is both cheap and sort of good for the environment. However, there are some other non-monetary costs to consider here, the lives of the animals. And at the end of the day, cows must die to supply the tallows that's needed to produce these notes. It can be argued that these cows were destined for the grave anyway, but supply exists when there is sufficient market demand. If the demand for tallow were to reduce, then supply would likely follow suit, at least eventually. Finally, it should be noted that due to their useful chemical properties and plentiful supply, both tallow and palm oil aren't just found in your cash. They're found in a wide range of everyday consumer products, including various soaps, glues, crayons, bread, and even credit cards. So it might seem odd to focus on the fairly niche use within currency, but the key difference here is that consumers can choose to avoid using products that contain tallow, thereby reducing market demand. But that isn't a choice that can be made when it comes to physical cash. There are plenty of everyday situations where humans have no option but to use cash. How else would they take their powdered vitamins? But seriously, a lot of people are forced to use a commodity that they find ethically or religiously abhorrent on a very regular basis. And that's why I would argue that even though a palm oil based alternative is far from ideal, it's more socially respectful than tallow, and in recent years, it's become more sustainable too. Leave a like if you found this video interesting, and make sure to let me know your opinions in the comments down below. See you next time.